So guys, we're going to be talking about Ruinous Effigy and, of course, Energy Accelerant. Now, Energy Accelerant broke the game. Or kind of broke the game. Let's just be real. It gave us probably the most fun experience we've ever had inside of Crucible for like maybe 24 hours. Now, Energy Accelerant is that final artifact mod for this season. It essentially states that it buffs our Dragonfly, Chain Reaction, and Firefly Explosion damage. The issue was, inside of Destiny 2, whatever code Bungie uses for those explosions is also the same things that are inside of the base damage for many of our weapons. Stated from the most recent patch, Energy Accelerant mod no longer increases damage against players. Also, it no longer increases the base damage of Symmetry, Telesto, Black Talon, and Deathbringer. Also, Telesto has received another sternly worded lecture, which at this point, Telesto don't even care, right? He's just like, yo, I'll see you next season, Sandbox team. Now, a couple of beautiful things about this little patch note. Number one, Bungie outlines only 4 weapons, which means everything else is on the table. Maybe not for PvP, but for PvE, yes. And we will be going over Energy Accelerant and everything that combines with it, as this does double the damage. And today, we're going to actually start with a weapon that you probably haven't seen in a very long time, Ruinous Effigy. This is a Trace Rifle, and to me, the most unique Trace Rifle of them all. Essentially coming with the exotic perk Transmutation. Final blows of this weapon collapses victims into a void transmutation sphere. Now, the trait on this weapon state that the transmutation sphere that you create can be picked up and wielded as a weapon by you or your allies. You have 3 ways to attack here. You have a light attack, a heavy attack, and of course a guard drain that, by the way, does blind enemies inside of PvE. Now, deconstruction is the exotic catalyst for this weapon, where it states that the weapon deals increased damage against targets damaged by transmutation spheres. Now, this is just the Trace Rifle damage, as in there's nothing here increasing the sphere damage, which is the whole point of today's video. Essentially, guys, Energy Accelerant doesn't exactly increase the damage of the Trace Rifle, nor does it increase the damage of our light attack with this transmutation sphere, or even the block attack. All of those stay the same. What doesn't stay the same, though, is the dunk attack, the slam attack, the heavy attack. This essentially is doubled when rocking Energy Accelerant. And we recognized this before, because this was the same case essentially before Energy Accelerant was disabled. Inside of PvP, it too was also increasing the heavy attack from 300 to 600. However, when testing it in PvP again yesterday, it did not, meaning Ruinous is not working against players as Bungie stated. Of course, we just had to double check because, well, you know, Bungie do be missing stuff sometimes. However, they did their due diligence and Ruinous is not working inside of PvP. But honestly, in PvE was where I was actually looking for Ruinous already, where I was actually considering using Ruinous. And it's essentially because of a couple of things. Number one, double the damage. Look at what it's doing to champions. This is a 1340 lost sector, and you see what it's doing here to champions. Now, granted, this is of course with Void Burn, but essentially it's nasty. I'm well under leveled here. I'm 1325, and it's almost one banging some of these champions. It's actually doing more damage than the heavy attack on my guillotine. Now, granted, of course, I'm not priming my guillotine. This is just base without whirlwind, but nonetheless, it's impressive. This is a special weapon that drops a little orb that most people would not consider optimal, but the damage speaks otherwise. The only thing that's not optimal is, well, you do have to be within punching distance of multiple enemies that could easily kill you, especially in high-end activity, whether it is these lost sectors or nightfalls. But I want to point you a little closer to something else that synergizes here with Ruinous as well as Energy Accelerant, and that's actually the mod Warmind's Decree. This mod states that void splash damage of any kind has a chance to create Warmind cells on final blows. Well, fellas, that's what's happening here. We're doing void splash damage with our dunk attacks. We're easily getting final blows due to the damage being double. And every time we do this, we have a chance to create Warmind cells. The synergy here, guys, is beautiful. And if you see, we're rocking this alongside Nezarec Sin, which means all void kills, whether it's from these transmutation spheres or from the Trace Rifle or anything else for that matter, is increasing our ability recharge rate. And that applies to everything on this subclass. So hands down, Ruinous with this combination has everything. It has synergy, it has the lethality, but simultaneously it does have a lot of risk, which is why we found a lot of success with Bottom Tree Nova. Essentially rocking things like Devour, consuming our grenade. Every single kill was giving us back our health. It was keeping us alive. Now, another thing that's beautiful about these transmutation spheres is that you can actually get the increase in damage from other sources. Buffs and debuffs works with it, despite it already having double the damage. That was my concern. I was like, all right, Energy Accelerant, doubling the damage. Does that mean we're not going to be able to get increased damage from sources like high energy fire or weapons of light? Will it not proc with breach and clear? No, considering that this is an artifact mod, it's completely separate, meaning it will work with buffs as well as debuffs. Something we did test though is actually this mod right here called Sustained Charge. This is a mod that states that you can become charged with light by rapidly defeating combatants with auto rifles, trace rifles, or machine guns. Now you can get charged with light a number of ways, but what I was curious about was whether or not those sphere attacks, those light and heavy and block attacks would give us charged with light. Like, I know it's not kills with the trace rifle per se, but it is a result of trace rifle kills. So we were curious about it. No, it does not though. Another thing we were curious about, considering the light attacks is essentially the same attack as our melee attack, would it proc things like Winter's Guile or Karnstein's, as those essentially are tied to our melees? Unfortunately, no. Again, Bungie's done their due diligence when it comes to Ruinous. They've made it separate. The sphere itself is completely separate except in the explosion department. That heavy attack, that explosion is somehow dipping into that dragonfly chain reaction and firefly damage and getting double the benefits, which means there's a lot of other weapons that could potentially be on this list. And yes, we will be going through all of them. As far as Ruinous and where it sits, would I use this in in-game content? Was definitely a fun playstyle. More than that, kind of wish Ruinous would just get a buff, right? You might actually see people using it, Bungie. The increase there in damage, the ability to create Warmon cells, on top of it being able to stack with buffs and debuffs, is quite nasty. The only drawback, of course, is that Energy Accelerant is a class item mod, therefore you cannot stack it with Breach and Clear. But of course, in team engagements, your fire team, of course, can proc that debuff for you if they're rocking Breach and Clear. But the biggest drawback is, of course, you have to be so close to your enemy, which is where I started to lean more toward Hunter. And that's essentially with just Invis Hunter on top tree tether. Dodging, picking up an orb, getting right next to my enemy, and then surprise attacking them. Again, optimal? Maybe not. Fun? Well, hell yeah. The only downside is you cannot dodge while holding the orb, as for some reason, the orb will disappear. So you actually want to get a kill, go invisible first, and then pick up the orb. And of course, if you drop the orb after you picked it up, it will disappear. So keep those things in mind. There's a play style at hand here that I myself have not quite perfected, but I see the potential. And considering we have new mods for trace rifles this season, scavengers working with it, ammo finders working with it, there's never been a better time to give trace rifles another go. So guys, try it out for yourselves. Combine those mods: Energy Accelerant, Warmind's Decree, Ruinous Effigy, do some dunk attacks, spawn some Warmind cells, and have fun with the explosions. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.